remote work is not where work is being done. Remote work is an entirely different operating system of work. More people are going to just be solopreneurs, and they're going to freelance. That's going to be the number one way people make a living. And they're just going to productize their skills. So they're going to take their skill set and they're going to sell it as a project based or fractional skill. And they're going to charge whatever it is that they're going to charge for it.
Boom! What is up, everyone? Tom Winning back here again. Today, I'm joined by Jordan Carroll, who's going to share his story of how he became a digital nomad. And I believe you're coaching people to become a digital nomad at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, well, the coaching that I do ranges from anyone who just wants to work remotely, whatever that means to them, to being a digital nomad, being able to travel across the world. And true remote work is element of choice. So I notice even in my digital nomad life, I've had kind of a slow mad tenure right now where I've enjoyed being in Mexico for quite some time. So
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny, like the last episode we did, we talked about this concept of slow travel, which I find really interesting and fascinating, right? It's like instead of having to be in a new city every single week and go to all
yeah,
these places and travel around like so much, it's okay to be in one place, be settled a bit more, be a bit more grounded. And I think there's so much power in that for sure. So I would love to hear a bit about like your story and like how you got into what you're doing now, what you do. Yeah, like how you got into like this lifestyle of like living in Mexico, like where are you from? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and like what you're up to.
yeah. Originally from Northern California, the Bay Area, in the US. And I think my first taste of remote work was like I was working as a telemarketer in college, and I had no idea like doing these weird telemarketing calls for this artist PR firm, which I'm pretty sure was a scam, was going to lead to my experiences with remote work and being that it was so important to me. And I always knew I wanted to travel, but I didn't necessarily know how. So once I ended up leaving college and getting a job in the real world and corporate, I was going to an office for almost a year, and then I started like working part-time remote, and then eventually got to a place where I left that, went to a small company, started realizing like I was having an existential crisis and I needed to leave the country. I needed to break up with my girlfriend, needed to move, like the shit that most nomads deal with, which is existential life crisis and things to run away from, which I find is a pretty common thing for people who are traveling. And that was something at that time that was really present for me. And then I traveled with a remote year group. If you're familiar with remote year.
No, no.
Um, okay, yeah. So remote year is like a travel organization that helps people find community while also bringing their remote job to travel the world 1 month at a time. So it's basically like they coordinate logistics. You just pay them a monthly fee and you travel with like 40, 50 other people to a different country every single month. And so I did that, and I wanted to work for them too. So I did the program, and then I ended up working for them for like a year and a half. And it was just an awesome experience. And that was like really my first taste of actually living nomadic, but I've been remote in some capacity for a decade now. So
Yeah. Nice, nice. Wow, powerful, man. So what made you want to go remote in the first place? I know you talked a little bit about corporate, like in that existential crisis. What
yeah,
did that
yeah.
kind of look like for you if you feel like digging deeper into that?
Yeah, I mean, first day was just a fucking snow day, man. Like we couldn't actually drive to the office. So it was literally like, oh, we got to work from home. And I was like, this is pretty cool. Like I got a nice buffer for the hangover to subside. I can stay in bed a little bit longer. I just kind of roll over. And at that time there was no Zoom. So you were just on like teleconference calls. So you could, just like log into the call on your phone and you just like pretend like you're listening. And I'm not proud of that. Like that's just kind of what my first experiences were when I was, first out of college. So as time went on, I realized, oh, okay, like this remote work thing could actually be a source of personal development. Like it could be something where it gives me additional time in my day to go work out at the time that I choose or prep my meal or just like find the pockets of time that you don't usually find if you're commuting to be able to better yourself. So for me, that was really the biggest transition was using that additional time that I was getting as a remote worker to actually pursue those things. And then eventually I was like, all right, well, now I want to actually travel. And that's a whole nother layer, like working from home is one thing, but adding a layer on that where you're traveling to different countries and you're managing and dealing with all that stuff. And that's why I started with remote year, because they help out with a lot of logistics. And I was, traveling with 40, 50 other people. Like, it was such a cool community. And we went, to 4 different countries together in 4 months. So that was like just a really cool experience.
Yeah, and community is such a massive part of travel, right? Like I find just the people you meet when you travel is like what makes it so exciting, what makes it so
Yeah.
exhilarating is like being able to be in these different tribes and these different communities like while you're traveling around. It's so powerful. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about like because a common thing I hear is like a lot of people want to get into remote work, but they're kind of unsure on like, do I have the right skills to do this? Like what kind of remote work? And there's all these questions that come up, I think. So yeah, like, if you could speak to that, that would be really interesting. And like where can people find remote work, but also more importantly, like how do people know what type of remote work to look for?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of layers to that question. There are different steps that I recommend that people take, but a lot of the times it starts with belief. Like, it simply starts with, like, do you believe that this can be a possibility for you or not? Because if you don't believe that something can be a possibility for you, no matter what skills you have, no matter what uh platform I tell you to look on, no matter, XYZ what I tell you to do, none of that else is going to matter. So I think belief is actually the number one most important thing for people that are looking to change their lifestyle, whether that be a remote lifestyle, digital nomad lifestyle. Like, you gotta, one, believe in yourself, and sometimes that takes putting yourself into communities where people are already doing it. So similar to what you said, why community is so important for nomads or for people that travel is because when you go to these new places and you already have pre-established contacts, it just makes life so much easier, right? You just hop in, you go to dinners, you go to lunches, you can work with people, all that sort of stuff. So all the best parts of my journey, especially traveling, has been through communities, whether that's been remote year, nomad cruise, nomad base, dynamite circle, like all these location independent communities that I'm part of have provided like so much for me. So if you're not in that place yet where you even know what to do, like, I would say put yourself at least even virtually around people that are doing it, because if you, part of belief is also seeing that people are doing it.
Yeah.
So if you're just like at your little small town in the Midwest United States or somewhere across the country, and you have no reference point to anyone who's doing it, it's really hard, right? So get yourself in those communities where people are already doing it, for one. Second, identifying your experiences, like, just think about what skills you've done on the computer, right? Like virtual skills and remote skills can be kind of synonymous. Obviously, there are reasons why, if you've had real remote experience working on remote teams, that's really critical that you use that. But just think about the virtual work that you've done. A lot of people don't realize, oh, you've worked remotely if you've taken emails from your phone in a grocery store while you're walking around, like after work. Like, that's working remotely, technically, right? So, like, it's not a stretch to say, if you're good at adapting to technologies, if you're good at with certain technical skills, whether that be market, like, you need to have at least one technical skill, like marketing or project management or programming or one of those things. It's really good to have one of those. But what's really important in remote work, in what I'm seeing, is all those secondary skills that are basically like communication, emotional intelligence, like the way that you interact with other people and collaborate. Like, those things are really important too. So if you've never worked remotely before, find people in your network that are working remotely, or expand your network to include people that are working remotely. And you might even try to like pitch people to intern or pitch people to work for them, especially business owners. That could be a really great way to start, but have like a specific skill in mind that you can actually bring to the table. And if you're not sure what that is, then you got to get the skills. Like, if someone comes to me like, I don't know what I could do, it's like, well, that's something you got to figure out. Like, like, we all know what we're good at. And if you don't know at all, then ask people around you, ask the people closest to you, what is it that you think that I'm good at, and figure out what types of those skills you can actually, like, with the amount of things that are available online to us now, you have to have some level of proactivity to figure some of this stuff out yourself. If you can't, you're not meant to be a remote worker. You're not meant to be a nomad. Like, you have to
Mm,
have an ability to be proactive, like, to be
yeah.
honest. And it's not for everybody. It's really not for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's so powerful that you said that. I think that's an absolutely true statement. This is not for everyone. There are so many people who just really struggle to be on the computer and to be doing these remote skills, that are required to do remote jobs. And I think it's so powerful to realize that, that not everybody can do this, and that we're blessed.
And to accept it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like be okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, like you said, like when it comes to if you feel like you have no skills to get a remote job, it just comes down to like being proactive and like learning the skills. There's so many beautiful
Yeah.
sites where you can take courses and learn new skills and like upskill. And so I think it's really about taking responsibility, not just for like learning the new skills, but also like being aware of what you already have and how that can be
Yeah.
utilized in remote work. So very powerful stuff. And I'd love to ask you like about that kind of upskilling piece. Have you found that there's any specific sites that you've found? Like I really like Udemy. Udemy is a great like course platform to learn a lot of stuff. Is there anything else you'd recommend in terms of like upskilling or getting new skills, or is it just more just trial and error, right? And learning on.
Find someone. I
Yeah,
would
and like learning by doing.
find someone to fucking mentor you and get you hands-on experience. If you can
Yes.
find someone in your field, and this is where I teach a lot of my teaching is around networking, because what I've realized is that, and this is where it goes back to the communities that I mentioned at the beginning, it goes to upskilling, is like when you put yourself around people that are doing the thing that you want to do, you can't help but absorb. So you need to make yourself, there's a couple different pieces here that we've identified. One is at some level, you need to be proactive, you need to have self-responsibility. And if you're asking such an elementary question of like, what skills do I have some self-reflection to understand that if you can't list any skills that you have, then this is probably not for you. Or you need to go back to the drawing board and proactively, like you need to be able to answer some of these questions for yourself. Like that's the reality of it. Because you're not going to be able to get to the point where you're traveling across the world, working with self-motivation on these things. If you can't answer a basic question like that, you're not going to get to that point. So start with figuring out what it is you maybe like to do, figure it out what it is you've done in past roles, and bring some of those experiences and skills to the forefront. If you need to fortify those skills, find someone online who might need some of those skills, might have some of that skill already, and figure out how you could be of value and service to them. And something that's really interesting for people that are either really early in their journey or they're transitioning, something that I've recommended that some of my clients have done is they pitch a 3-month basically internship where they spend 5-10 hours a week working for someone who owns a business for a testimonial and for mentorship. Like that's the sole purpose of them working for that person, to get their hands dirty on something. And that sounds, some people like, oh, why would I ever work for free and do this? Like, well, for the experience, for the testimonial, to get the mentorship. Like nothing is free. Like that person's time mentoring you is worth something. It's
Mm.
not free to them either. Like just because you need something for free and because they're going to have to fix all your fuck ups, like that doesn't mean that this is free for them. So you have to understand, like wherever you're coming into this from, like you have to be willing to put in some sweat equity to be able to get something out. And this is of course for people that are super early in their journey. There are some people who, have been around for 10 years in their industry. It's like someone like that who really knows what their role is, who really knows how to do things. Like that kind of stuff isn't necessary. So it just depends on where someone's at in their journey and also their belief systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if someone's already been working, I mean, in office jobs, for example, like a lot of people already have a lot of transferable skills, like they're already
Yeah.
working mostly on a computer anyway, mostly remote. They're just in an
And
office.
if you're working with someone in a different office, let's say it's like you're in your office, but there's a different team in a different office, like you're working remotely, you're
Yeah,
collaborating across time zones. You can use that and you can frame that as something you put in your resume or something you put in your LinkedIn. Like that can all be framed as remote work in some way.
absolutely. And what do you think about like companies in terms of like remote work and how they're approaching it? Have you found many like restrictions or limits or limitations around like companies and remote work and the rules that they set in place for
Oh
that
yeah.
work?
Oh yeah, they're awful. It's like 95% of remote jobs have some sort of geographical restriction. That's a flex jobs statistic. Granted, it was a couple years ago. I think it's still probably about relevant now. And the biggest reason for that is tax, compliance, legal. There are a lot of different reasons why companies have some sort of geographical restriction for who they can hire. There are a lot of companies now called EORs, employer of record companies, that are like, this is the hottest tech in remote right now, is these companies like Deal or Oyster or the company Remote, and they're basically trying to solve the issue of helping companies hire remotely without these restrictions, right? And they own a headquarters in these different countries, so then they allow people to be able to get hired legally in different places. Now, those are some details that may or may not be interesting. The point is that very few companies are doing remote work to its core the best that it can be done. What I mean by that, remote work is not where work is being done. Remote work is an entirely different operating system of work. It's an assumption that asynchronous communication is first, meaning we're not going to have a bunch of calls and just be on Zoom calls all day. We're going to document everything. We're going to put everything in the chats, in our Notion board, in our task manager. Like, there's going to be a very specific way of working that prioritizes remote first over everything else, with the assumption that we're never going to have an office. Very few companies actually do that well. I think as we go on with more time, more will be doing that. But I actually did a mini documentary on that on my YouTube. So I interviewed a bunch of different leaders at some of these remote companies and talked about why we're having these issues with companies specifically, and then also what people should expect in the next few years.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. How do you think things will shift over the next few years, and what will that have to look like?
More people are going to just be solopreneurs, and they're going to freelance. That's going to be the number one way people make a living. Is that they're going to find these freelancer profiles on like Upwork or Fiverr or whatever. They're just going to productize their skills. So they're going to take their skill set and they're going to sell it as a project-based or fractional skill, and they're going to charge whatever it is that they're going to charge for it. That's going to be the number one way that people make money. It's the most flexible. It's the easiest way to monetize your, like owning a full-fledged business where you maybe own an asset, more of an asset, like a business that runs on itself, something that you want to sell, is much harder to do than just being a freelancer. So I just think more people are going to go the freelancer route. And I think more and more companies are going to hire freelancers. They're going to get away from hiring full-time. They're going to just work on project basis. Globalization is going to push a lot of wages down. We're going to see a lot of people move. We see a lot of people move out of their home countries and move to places where there are more cheaper cost of living. We're also going to see a lot of gentrification because of that, and we're going to see a lot of the shifts in the global economy, and it's going to cause some pretty fucked up stuff. It's going to be good for some people. It's going to be really bad for other people, and it's going to be crazy.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, like to talk to what you were just saying, I think it's, not just freelance, but also contract work too. Like, I feel like contract work is going to become like the new.
That's what I mean by freelance. Yeah. Freelance
Contract,
is,
freelance,
freelance simply contracting it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's definitely the direction things are going to go. And I think it should go, honestly, to be honest, because the way I look at work, and like, especially hiring in companies, it's about an exchange of value, right? Instead of just like time for money, like, okay, here's your hourly rate, this is what you're doing. It's like, it's more of an exchange of value, right? Like, this is the value you're bringing to this company with these specific skill sets. How you do that doesn't fucking matter. And I think that's the important piece of it, is like allowing people to be their own boss in a way, like freelance and contract. They can build teams under them. They can like do these things under them where it gives them more freedom to bring more value to the company. So I think it's a massive win-win for both parties. It's like, it gives people the opportunity to not only find work really easily and have less restrictions and rules around what that work looks like, but it also allows them to think outside the box and have like different opportunities to bring more value to the company, which I think is an amazing part of it. So yeah, like anything else you can think of around like that shift and like what people need to be prepared for? I know you mentioned a lot of things.
Yeah.
Anything you want to dive a bit more deep into?
I think for people on that freelancing spectrum, or people that are wanting to be valuable in the future of the job marketplace, it's really imperative that you get ahead of AI and know how to use AI. That is going to be that's already like So, I mean, it allows you to cut so much time out of the things that you do. It allows you to be 10 times more productive. It's just insane. It's maybe
Yeah.
even factors of hundreds. So getting to know how to use AI, like don't get behind on that because it's moving really fast. And it's not to say like find every AI tool out there. Just get really good at ChatGPT, for instance. Get really good at a couple different AI tools that you can be a subject matter expert in and be like expert level. And then the other piece is get really good at asynchronous communication. Get really good at being able to send full length messages and documentation to people so that they actually know what it is they would need to do in a project. Some of that requires practice, but you can also again do it with AI. Like I have some prompts. I'm creating a prompt AI prompt resource for remote job seekers, freelancers, and that's going to be part of one of the main things that I'm looking at is how do people communicate more effectively in ways that give enough information so that they're pushing forward projects and there's not miscommunications and people have trouble communicating. That's like especially written, like
Yeah.
not everybody's a good writer. So you could use AI to basically do all the writing for you and be super clear. Obviously, you want to edit it, but I think that's where the future is going. Is like skills that you need to have AI and written communication in general.
Yeah. Yeah, especially for remote, like communication is so key, you know. I've found in my remote jobs, it's like so important that you're very clear with your communication and also like consistent and timely with that as well. So there's like a few skills to unpack there. It's not only like just how well you can write things and how well you can structure that message, but also being on top of like, you know, your calendar management and like when you send
Yeah.
these messages, when you send these updates, when you send these documents, like being on top of that as well. So yeah, it's super interesting stuff. I think this is a great place to wrap it up. I don't like to keep these like things going too long. I think it's nice to have short, sharp information. I think there's been a lot of value in this call so far, and really appreciate you jumping on and sharing. Is there any last bits of advice, anything you want to share to wrap things up, and any last things you want to add in?
Yeah, I mean, I have a book. It's called Remote for Life, and it talks a lot about some of the things that we've talked about, and also talks about how to find remote jobs, some of my predictions for the future, and yeah, it's been a bestseller. It's been out for about almost a year. It'll be a year and 2 months,
No.
and it was a labor of love that I started actually before all this AI stuff came out. So it was kind of funny to see how fast things move. But there's a lot of lessons in there that are completely evergreen, and I wanted to make it something that was still going to be relevant in like 10 years. So I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, and uh, love to speak with people and get connected to people. So people can find me on like LinkedIn or on my website. So
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for jumping on.